They're gonna take the house next month.
I'm always working.
Hey film lovers, and welcome to Realtor Cut It. Today we will be reviewing the new sci-fi series now streaming on Showtime, The Man Who Fell to Earth, starring Chiwetel Ejiofor, Naomi Harris, and Clark Peters. Guys, I won't lie to you, after seeing the first episode, really, I was gonna say the series, but the very first episode, you know, it instantly brought me back to the book written by David Wilcock called The Ascension Mysteries. You know, in that book, he gives details of an alleged immortal black man with Christ-like abilities who descended to Earth in the 1960s. And in 2017, I think he was on the podcast Coast to Coast AM, and a caller called in, and David broke down this story. And here is the audio to that. It's only a few seconds long, a few minutes long, and I hope YouTube don't strike me, but I want you guys to listen to what David says about this Christ-like man.
Black Jesus story was probably one of the most shocking things I ever heard. It came from my insider, Jacob, I call him that in the book, who actually was working for the Rothschilds and still does. So the story goes that in the 1960s there was a black man in Africa who came in with abilities complementary to those of Jesus. And he was performing miracles. He was starting to get people to listen to what he had to say. And the cabal tried to kill him, and you know, they could shoot him in the head and his skull would just regenerate and the flesh would grow back, and he was fine. But the story was that this guy, you know, they finally said, okay, we're going to bring you to the United Nations and share your message with the world. Let's get you on this flight. They bring him on this flight, and instead of bringing him to the United Nations, they shot him repeatedly, and then actually had some kind of meat grinder device and basically like a bandsaw, I guess, and sawed up his body into a whole bunch of pieces, put him in these very like radioactive shielded containers, and then had all these fighter jets dock with the plane and fly his body parts to all corners of the world, where then these containers turned them into ash. And they thought that maybe this would defeat him, like that his body somehow, the tissue was necessary. So if they destroyed all the tissue in all these places across the world, maybe they could defeat him. Well, he then regenerated in their offices and was fully fine, fully intact. But the sad part is that he said, you know, you guys so badly do not want me to be here that I am not going to be able to do any more. You're going to get what you want, but bear in mind that in the future, many others like me will be coming, and when they do, you will not be able to stop us.
Now, this series, you know, I will say that it gave me that whole vibe, you know, and I don't know, maybe you guys didn't hear the same thing I heard after watching it, but I definitely got that. And I do feel that there's deeper meaning here and deeper things we can compare, which I'll plan to do later on in the show. But I want to also point out a few things. I did not know that this show originally was a book written by Walter Tevis. I also did not know that this was a film made in the 70s. Oh, and the book was written in the 60s, but I did not know that this was a film made in the 70s starring David Bowie and directed by Nicholas Roeg. So I watched the film, and let me just say this. I had no idea what was going on. I really didn't. I won't lie to you, because the film is very expressive, and seeing that the similarities were there with the both characters falling to Earth, with them both being from Anthea. So I was like, okay, this is definitely a sequel, right? With that knowledge, let's break down the synopsis, and then we're gonna break down what this show really is about. The series opens with Kay Faraday, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, standing in front of a cheering crowd of people and 3 large televisions, giving a speech. In one of his opening lines, he says,
"I am an immigrant, a refugee.
To survive, I had to be reborn.
Which leads us into a flashback where he descends to Earth appearing like a ball of light. He then begins to transform from an alien form into a human body. The scene then continues with Faraday making his way to a water hose in front of an automotive shop. Faraday is fully naked, and when the owner of the shop sees him, he calls the cops. When the cops arrive, they witness a water hose down his throat, which stuns them, so they remove the hose, tase him, and bring him in for questioning. He is then given clothes from the morgue and questioned by the intake officer, but Faraday only mimics and repeats dialogue of what he hears around him and craves water. He rambles on about a mission. When the officer asks, where is he from? He says he is from Anthea. Then he tells the officer he's on a 9-hour mission and requests the officer to call Justin Falls, played by Naomi Harris. Now, Justin, a former MIT student who was striving to be a scientist and engineer, but due to a failure, she decides to give up on her dreams and now is working in a toxic waste field in New Mexico to make ends meet for her daughter, Molly, and her father, Josiah, who is played by Clark Peters. From this scene on, Faraday is on a mission to convince Justin how important she is to his mission. Later in the series, Faraday is transported to the forest where he is now talking to Thomas Jerome Newton, played by Bill Nighy, whose last words to him are,
I know exactly what you're thinking. This is not the Anthean I remember. Well, soon enough, you won't be the Anthean you remember either. But I'm gonna make you the god they can't ignore.
So guys, this series is 10 episodes. I think they're each like an hour long. And to be honest with you, it grabbed my attention. After the first 3 minutes, I was hooked. So let's break some things down. This entire series has dual meanings. Number one, it's the story of Jesus. It's the Savior story. You know, in the novel, the people of Anthea have destroyed their civilization through war. They've wiped off 2 other races that cohabitated. Now they've gotten to the point where they need to evacuate due to drought. Newton in the movie was trying to build a spaceship to bring his people to Earth. His idea is once they brought the people to Earth, he was going to help save the race. Faraday is on the same mission, and that is the story of Jesus coming to save the people, right? The Savior. It's a fish out of water plot, but then too, you also have an underlying theme here, and that is losing focus of your goal and how it can destroy you. We just heard Newton say that he can make him look like a god, or he can make them worship him as a god. In the novel, they make a great deal of reference to the story of Icarus. And for those of you who don't know the story of Icarus, he and his father were banned to this labyrinth that his father had to make. I don't feel like going into that backstory because I don't want this video to be too long. But his father said to him, here's the deal. We're going to make these wings out of beeswax. And what you're going to do, you're going to fly out of this labyrinth. But you can't fly too high to the sun because the wings are going to melt. And you can't fly too low to the ground because they're going to get wet. But because once Icarus started flying, he felt like a god. He lost sight of what he was supposed to do. And because he lost sight of what he was supposed to do, he forgot what he knew to do. And he flew all the way up to the sun. The wings melted, and boom, he fell in the water and drowned. And that's what happened to Newton. Now, what is going to happen to Faraday is left to be seen. Now, guys, this review is running a little too long. I want to come back and give you guys a part 2 because there is a lot that I wanted to say, but I do not like my reviews to go over 15 minutes. You know, my grandfather used to say, too much of something ain't good for nothing, okay? Now, we're going to get to the part of would I reel this? Hell yes, I would reel this, okay? You know, so if you want a part 2 to this, comment below. I will do a part 2. But until next time, I hope you've enjoyed this review.